Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of whispers, firelight, and suspicion. A time when a crooked smile or the wrong herb in your satchel could get you accused of consorting with the devil. Yeah, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I want to know, what city are you listening from? And what time is it where you are now? Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The village smells like smoke, bread, and a little bit of livestock sweat. It's 1602 and you're not special. Yet, you're just one more thread in the tapestry of a small European village where everyone knows everyone and gossip is basically currency. You walk the same muddy path each day, past the same lopsided cottages, nod at the same crooked old man who always seems to be carving the same piece of wood. People here don't change much, and that's exactly the problem. You've got a little garden. You know your way around herbs, not because you're some mysterious crone, but because knowing what eases a fever or soothes childbirth pain is literally what keeps people alive out here. But lately, something's shifted. The widow across the way won't meet your eyes anymore. Children giggle and run when they see you coming. Last week, a neighbor's pig dropped dead overnight and your name was mentioned. Just mentioned, but you felt it like a cold finger down your spine. There's an itch beneath the skin of this village now. A tension, electric and sour. It crackles in whispered prayers and lingers in the pauses between greetings. Everyone's talking about it. The baker's wife says the devil's in the hills again. The blacksmith insists he saw a goat walk upright. No one says the word witch. Not yet. But it hangs in the air like damp fog curling into your ears. Here's the thing about being accused of witchcraft in the 1600s Europe. You don't have to actually do anything wrong. Being different is enough. Being alone is enough. Being poor, too old, too outspoken, too clever, or too good with plants. Yep, enough. Live on the edge of town, have no husband, keep a black cat, triple threat, and so you try not to draw attention. You walk slower, talk quieter. You stop leaving food out for the stray dog with the milky eye because someone might think it's your familiar. You bury your stash of dried mushrooms just in case. You even throw away the little bundle of herbs you tied with a red string, the one you kept to ease your nightmares. But still, you feel it building. You're not imagining it. In the last few years, the witch hunts have ramped up. Ever since the late 1500s, waves of trials and executions have swept through Germany, Scotland, France, Switzerland, anywhere people can blame their bad harvests and plagues on someone else. Witch panics are like forest fires. One spark and the whole thing can go up. Your village hasn't burned anyone yet, but you know others have. A friend's cousin in Trier was taken in the night, burned the next week. You heard she confessed to flying on a broomstick and kissing the devil's behind. Did she actually say it? Or was she just broken by the iron tongs? It's hard to know what's true anymore. You heard someone in the next valley was drowned to prove she wasn't a witch, tied up and thrown in the river. If she floated, guilty. If she sank, innocent. But well, drowning doesn't exactly leave room for a do-over. This isn't a rare story. It's happening, and everyone knows it. So you retreat into yourself, a quiet turtle pulling its head into a shell that feels thinner by the day. It doesn't take much to be a witch these days. A wart in the wrong place, a dream you talk about too loudly, or a child who points at you while crying. All of it counts. It's the little things that pile up. You've started noticing them. The signs people cling to when they want to believe someone's guilty. That twitch in your left eye, clearly a hex. Your habit of humming to yourself when you cook. A summoning. The fact that you were born during a thunderstorm. Oof. You're basically already dancing naked under the moon in their minds. That part about the thunderstorm. Yeah, that's real. You were born in July during the loudest, wildest summer storm your mother could remember. That story used to be charming. A local legend. Now it comes with side eyes and muttered prayers. Because being born under certain stars, on certain nights, or with certain marks on your skin, is no longer quaint. It's dangerous. And you do have a mark just above your hip, something you've had since birth, a reddish patch that flares up when it's cold. You've always thought of it as a quirk. The local healer once called it a witch's teat, laughing as she did. But you both knew she was joking back then. Now that joke could be Exhibit A. Here's the thing that really messes with your head. The people who believe this stuff aren't just fools. Some are deeply religious, others are scared, and some are just opportunists. If someone's property is valuable, a witch accusation can open the door for seizure. If a widow has no sons, no male protector, she's vulnerable. No husband, no defense. And too many women alone means too many targets. A deadly math again. And then there's the animals. Own a cat, witch, dog, maybe owl? Definitely. You've kept a chicken that follows you around. A clever one with shiny black eyes and a strange little strut. You call her Magda. The kids think she's creepy. You've started hiding her when people visit. If someone's child falls ill and they remember the chicken staring at them, well, that's enough for suspicion. And it won't be the child they punish. It'll be you, and maybe Magda. Back then, people didn't believe in coincidences the way we do now. If your cow dies the day after you argue with your neighbor, you didn't just have bad luck. No, she hexed it. If hail ruins your barley, but not hers, she controls the weather. And if your newborn dies after she touched it, even once, well, don't even wait for the tribunal. The whispers will finish what the law starts. In the minds of your neighbors, there's a checklist. Unofficial, inconsistent, and yet somehow universally known. Midwife, check. Widow, check. Lives alone, check. Knows Latin or Greek, big check. Red hair, left-handed, frequent dreams. Born with a call, lives near water, walks outside at night. The more boxes you tick, the closer you get to the fire. It's like a game no one admits they're playing, but everyone knows the rules. And here's the cruel twist. The things that could save you, the gifts you have, the knowledge you've worked hard for, are the same things that could doom you. You know how to ease pain, stop bleeding, lower fevers. You can coax flavor from spoiled meat and keep a fire lit in the rain. But if you share too much, you're unnatural. If you keep it to yourself, you're selfish. Either way, you lose. This is how the witch craze begins. Not with storms and demons, but with an idea, a creeping doubt that spreads like mold across the edges of belief. Europe in the early 1600s is already a tinderbox. War is chewing at the borders. The Protestant Reformation has cracked the foundation of religious authority. The 30 Years' War is just around the corner, and people are terrified. They're terrified of losing control, terrified of divine punishment, terrified of each other. Witchcraft becomes the scapegoat of the age. You see, unlike famine or war or plague, a witch is tangible. You can point to them, tie them to a post, blame them for everything that's wrong. It's easier to light a fire under a woman than to admit your crops failed because of frost or poor planning. It's more satisfying to accuse a midwife of murder than to face your own child's weakness. In an age that's obsessed with sin and salvation, someone must be responsible, and that someone is usually female, old, unmarried, or just a little too sharp for comfort. The intellectual framework for this panic had been laid for centuries. The infamous Malleus Maleficarum, or Hammer of Witches, published in 1487, was essentially a how-to guide for witch hunting. It laid out the signs, the tests, and even how to interrogate suspects to guarantee a confession. The book spread across Europe like wildfire, becoming a bestseller in hellish circles, giving theological and legal justification to local fears. But it wasn't just books. Local folklore mattered just as much. Old stories about witches stealing milk, riding brooms, and turning into crows. Fear always travels fast when it wears a familiar face. Historians today still puzzle over how these ideas spread so fast and stuck so hard. Some point to the climate anxiety from the Little Ice Age, a period of colder weather that led to crop failures and famine. Others say it was tied to male dominance, reasserting itself during times of social upheaval. Blame needed a name, and witches were convenient. You're led to the small room behind the chapel, where the inquest is already waiting. There's a priest, Father Olin, who used to give you apples as a child, and a magistrate whose name you've never learned but whose eyes are gray and too bright. They offer you a stool. It creaks beneath you like a bad omen. What follows isn't a trial. Not yet. It's a dance. A dangerous, exhausting dance full of questions you can't answer right. Have you ever spoken with spirits? Number. But you've lost family? Yes. Didn't you pray to see them again? Yes. Would you say you've had visions? Number. And dreams? Yes. Of what? Birds? Black ones? Crows? Crows are harbingers, are they not? You guess they are. So, you admit to a connection with signs of ill fortune. You blink. You've walked into a maze with no exits. Your answers are written down carefully. Every hesitation is noted. Every stammer becomes a symptom. After hours of questions, they finally let you go. You're not to leave town, the constable says. As you walk home, the sky looks gray in a way that feels personal. Someone has left a wreath of thorns on your doorstep. You step over it and close the door behind you gently, like slamming it might break what little life you have left. The fire has gone out in your hearth, and for the first time in years, you don't bother to relight it. Not because it's cold. You can feel the chill crawling in through the walls, but because you're too tired, too watched, too aware of every move, every sound, every flick of a curtain across the village. And besides, smoke means life, and life draws attention. You've started to think that the quieter you are, the longer you'll last. You try to go about your business. You trim your herbs, though your hands shake more than they used to. You hang rosemary and thyme to dry, but they droop fast in the damp air, and you wonder if that's some kind of sign. You used to hum as you worked. Now the silence around you feels like it's waiting to pounce. Even Magda is quieter than usual, huddled beneath the table, like she knows that being too visible is a bad idea. She's not wrong. You try to stay useful, safe through service, a neighbor's boy scrapes his knee, and his mother comes to you when the bleeding won't stop. You hand her a poultice of yarrow and comfrey, your voice soft, your eyes careful. She doesn't meet your gaze. "Thank you," she says, but there's no warmth in it, just obligation. You're not a friend, you're a transaction. And when the boy heals, no one will say your name. Herbalism is what you know. It's what your grandmother knew before you and her mother before that. Most of it isn't magic, just practice, observation, and a lot of patience. You know how to strip bark in spring and which plants prefer shade. You know what root tastes bitter when the fever breaks, and what flowers bloom only at night. You've never needed a demon to show you these things. The earth speaks if you listen, but not everyone sees it that way. The line between healer and heretic is razor thin, and lately, it feels like you've already stepped across it. Knowledge itself is suspect. They say the devil favors women with too many books and too much time. They say his whispers sound like wisdom. You once read Latin well enough to follow a sermon. That was before you stopped attending, not out of spite, but because the glances became too sharp, too pointed, and now that absence has a shape people can name. You think of all the women who used to be like you. Wise women, herbalists, midwives, the caretakers of things others feared. They weren't saints, and they weren't witches either. But history chews them up the same way. Take Walpurga Hausmannen, a midwife in Dillingen, who was burned in 1587 after confessing under torture to killing 40 children with the devil's help. No one stopped to ask how many she might have actually delivered or saved or soothed in fevered hours. They only remembered the numbers carved into her sentence, not the ones erased by her hands. There's a debate among scholars, has been for centuries, about whether these women were genuinely practicing what we might call witchcraft, or if they were simply using folk knowledge passed through generations. Some believe that in rural Europe, magic and medicine were the same thing, that charms, prayers, and herbs all blurred together into one long act of hope. Others say the church defined magic only when it became a threat to its power, twisting comfort into crime. You begin refusing patients quietly. A headache here, a sore knee there. You tell them you're not feeling well, that you're resting, that you've forgotten your recipes. Most don't argue. Some look relieved. One woman mutters, "About time," and walks away without waiting for a goodbye. It starts with a cough of all things, just a dry little hack from the miller's youngest, something that wouldn't even merit a second glance in a normal year. But this is not a normal year. His mother, brittle and panicked, says it began after he played near your cottage, chasing that stray chicken with the odd eyes. You weren't even home. You were down at the river rinsing out your linens. But that doesn't matter. By supper, 3 more villagers know. By morning, it's 15. And by nightfall, someone has scraped a faint symbol into your door. The next day, no one greets you at the well. So, who accuses you? That's the part that always stings, because it's never a stranger. In the 1600s Europe, your accuser is usually someone close. Your neighbor, your midwife, your childhood friend turned bitter rival over a fencing dispute in the communal garden. It could be the woman you helped through childbirth last spring. The one who survived? Yes, but whose child didn't. Grief and suspicion hold hands in these parts. And guilt is a hungry thing. It looks for somewhere else to live. The process is almost formulaic. It begins with gossip, then cold stares, and then the local priest is just having a conversation with the magistrate. If they decide you're suspicious enough, the authorities step in. And when they do, they usually don't arrive alone. 3 men, 4 maybe, if they're feeling pious. They don't knock. They come with a list, and they come with questions. The questions don't need to make sense. Has your cow ever gone dry without cause? Do your candles flicker when you speak? Have you dreamt of flying? Most people accused of witchcraft never stand a chance. The burden of proof isn't on your accuser. It's on you. And how exactly do you prove you haven't done something? How do you prove a negative? It's not like you kept a diary titled, "Days I Definitely Did Not Curse My Neighbors." The system doesn't want truth. It wants spectacle. It wants control. It wants to remind people that sin has a shape, and that shape might look a lot like your face. In Nördlingen, there's a case of a woman accused because she got the last jug of honey at the market. In Lorraine, a man accused his sister after she refused to lend him money. There's even a documented trial in Würzburg where a 10-year-old boy named his own grandmother. The boy later said he thought they'd just ask her questions. She was executed. This isn't folklore, it's history. You've started noticing that people don't even whisper around you anymore. They just pause until you pass, like your presence is static on a prayer. That old woman who once shared recipes with you now pretends not to hear your greeting. The man whose arthritis you soothed with nettle poultices clutches his rosary whenever you walk by. You're alone, and you know it. Whatever this is, it's been set in motion. There's a kind of theater to the whole thing. Once someone accuses you, they need witnesses. So suddenly, everyone remembers things. Funny little moments that now seem full of sinister meaning. The time your firewood wouldn't catch flame for a full minute. The day someone's dog growled at your shadow. That peculiar dream someone had 2 years ago where you were flying with bats. The stories don't have to be true. They just have to be repeated. And once they are, they settle like mold on old bread, clinging, multiplying, impossible to scrape off. There's no thunderclap, no fire in the sky, just a knock on your door. Too early in the morning for it to be friendly. You're still tying your apron when it happens. It's soft, almost polite. 3 taps, but your body knows before your brain does. Something inside you sinks, like a stone dropped into cold black water. You open the door. It's not who you expected, and yet it is. The village constable, flanked by 2 men you recognize from the next town over. Outsiders brought in because your people are too frightened or too familiar. One of them wears a dark cloak and carries a small book that he holds like it's alive. The other has a face like an old boot and fingers that tap against his belt like they're drumming out your sentence already. "We've had reports," the constable says, not unkindly. "You're not under arrest." "Not yet. You're invited, summoned really, to come for questioning. Just a few things they want to clarify. No accusations, they insist. Just an inquiry." Your stomach clenches. You know the difference between a question and a trap. You ask if you can bring your chicken. They don't laugh. The man with the boot face actually writes something in his book, and so you walk with them, past your herbs, past the drying strips of apple on your windowsill, past Magda, who clucks once and vanishes beneath the fence. The path into town has never felt this long before. People watch through slatted shutters. One woman crosses herself. A child calls your name, your real name, not witch, but is pulled away by her mother. The room is behind the chapel. It's cold. The priest, Father Olin, is there, along with the magistrate and the man with the boot face, who introduces himself as Master Velt, examiner of deviant behavior. It's as gross as it sounds. They ask about your dreams, about animals, about books. The questions are a labyrinth with no exit. Every denial is a lie, every admission a confession. You admit to a connection with signs of ill fortune, they'll say, after you admit that crows are, in fact, harbingers. These same questions are being asked all across the continent. In places like Würzburg, where hundreds have already been burned, the same template is used again and again. It doesn't matter whether the town is Catholic or Protestant. The panic doesn't discriminate much. It just looks for fuel. Scholars today still debate how much of this frenzy was orchestrated from above and how much was born from below in the dark soil of fear and superstition. Some say the church lit the match. Others insist it was the people themselves who carried the fire forward, household by household, word by poisoned word. And then there's the other layer to it all: gender. Most of the accused are women. Some historians argue that witchcraft was a way to punish women who stepped outside their prescribed roles, women who were too independent, too educated, too economically successful, or just too strange. In your case, it's probably all four. You've survived without a husband. You've made money. You've read. You've healed. Unforgivable things all. You sit at your table and light a candle. Magda hops onto the windowsill, blinking at you with those weird little eyes. You feed her a crumb. She pecks at it thoughtfully, as if contemplating whether or not to bail. You can't blame her. The witch craze doesn't burn like wildfire. It crawls, creeps, a slow fever that turns neighbor against neighbor. But once it starts, it's hard to stop. They arrive in a wagon, so dark and narrow, it looks more like a coffin on wheels than a carriage. You hear the iron wheels before you see them, grinding against the dry dirt like a blade across bone. The entire village watches as it creaks into the square, pulled by two horses that seem too clean for your muddy little town. They don't belong here, these men. You can tell by the leather of their boots, the stiffness of their posture, the way the villagers lower their heads as they pass, as if hoping not to be seen, or worse, remembered. These are the men who hunt witches. There's always someone like them, no matter the region. Specialists, they're called, witch finders. In some places, they're hired by the church. In others, they're freelance zealots who've carved out reputations, one torch at a time. Sometimes they're scholars. More often, they're just men with hard eyes and a talent for cruelty, dressed up as righteousness. The taller one wears a broad black hat and walks with his hands behind his back like he's always halfway through a sermon. His name is Elias Grunther, and you don't know it yet, but you'll come to hate the sound of it. The other is rounder, ruddy, a man who chews cloves and never stops smiling with his mouth, but never his eyes. That's Marcus. He's the one who speaks first when they reach the church steps. "We come at the council's request," he announces loud enough for everyone to hear. "To cleanse and to protect." Cleanse. Protect words that should be comforting. But here, they crack like whips. They begin immediately. No rest, no settling in. By nightfall, Elias has already summoned the priest and magistrate for a private consultation. They shut themselves in the chapel and speak in low tones. By the next day, it's clear what they're doing. Interviewing. Not questioning suspects yet, but talking to the villagers, gathering stories, drawing a web of whispers and superstition. And then comes the worst part, the inspection. Marcus appears with a candle and a smaller man you haven't seen before holding a case of iron tools. You're asked, ordered, to remove parts of your clothing so they can search for signs. The devil's mark, they call it. A patch of skin that feels no pain. Where the devil touched you sealed the pact. Most people have moles, freckles, birthmarks. If they want to find something, they will. You hesitate, and Elias raises an eyebrow. If you refuse, he says, we have legal authority to proceed by force. So, you comply. There's nothing dignified about it. You stand in the cold room while they examine you like an animal at market. The man with the tools prods your skin with a long pin, your shoulder, your back, your hip. Then he jabs just above your waist, your birthmark. You wince, but it's too late. No pain? Elias asks. You start to object, but Marcus shakes his head. She flinched, he says slightly. Elias sighs, disappointed. So close. The implication is clear. They're hoping for a mark. They want something to confirm what they've already decided. When they find nothing conclusive, they don't declare you innocent. They simply nod and say, we'll continue our investigation. You dress in silence. Your throat feels raw. On your way out, Elias says almost casually, be mindful of your steps, mistress. The devil walks in familiar shoes. You knew it would happen. You could feel it in the way the wind pulled at your shutters that morning, in the stillness of Magda's feathers as she stood unmoving beside the hearth. Still, when the knock comes, it feels like a betrayal. 3 hard raps. No hesitation this time. They aren't pretending anymore. You already know it's not a request. You barely get the door open before the men step inside. Grunter in front, his hat casting a long shadow across your floor. Marcus follows, holding a thick rope and a paper sealed with wax. He doesn't even read it aloud. He just says, you've been accused by 4 individuals. You're now under official suspicion. The world tilts. It doesn't matter who accused you. Not anymore. 1 name was bad enough. 4 is a death sentence waiting for punctuation. You don't cry. You don't scream. There's no time. They bind your wrists before you can even say goodbye to Magda. And she squawks sharply, offended, perhaps even afraid. You glance at her once, and the last thing you see before the door closes behind you is her tiny black eyes locked on yours. They walk you down the village path with a quiet efficiency that makes it worse. No yelling, no mob, just the scraping of your boots in the dirt and the sound of children being pulled indoors. Curtains flutter shut like wings. They take you to a small stone building just off the square. Not a jail exactly, but close enough. It smells of damp straw and iron. The door creaks as they close it behind you. And for the first time in your life, you hear what it sounds like when freedom disappears. They don't question you right away. That's part of the game. First, they let silence do the talking. They leave you sitting in the dark for hours, maybe a day, maybe more. Time warps in here. You tell yourself stories in your head, names of herbs, recipes for stews, the sound of your grandmother's voice, but the silence keeps pulling you under. When they return, they're carrying tools, not all at once. First, it's just a knife, dull, more for gesture than damage. Then, a long pin, thin enough to slip beneath skin without leaving a trail. The goal is not to kill you. It's to make you talk, or rather, to make you say what they want to hear. Because at this point, it isn't about truth. It's about performance. Confession is theater, and the audience is already convinced. They call it interrogation, but really, it's a script. You just haven't been handed your lines yet. Alias speaks gently at first. "We want to help you," he says, like a father coaxing a lie out of a child. "Confession will save your soul, if not your body." You almost laugh. You almost spit in his face, but something stops you. Maybe it's the sharpness in Marcus's eyes, or the quiet hiss of iron being placed into fire across the room. Instead, you say nothing for now. There's a strange hierarchy to pain. They don't go straight to fire. They start with pressure, twisting your fingers with a vice until you feel the bones strain. They use cold, freezing water poured over your hands, waiting to see if you flinch. If your skin turns red, you're guilty. If it doesn't, you're guilty. It's absurd. But in their minds, the devil protects his own. They say confession is a door. Open it, and salvation comes rushing in like light through a keyhole. But that's a lie, at least in this room with its stone floor and soot-streaked walls. Here, confession is more like a trap door, and once it's opened, there's no climbing back out. You sit slumped against the wall, your wrists still bound, the ache in your shoulders blooming like bruised fruit. They haven't touched you today, not physically, but their words have teeth, and they've been gnawing since dawn. This time they bring bread, real bread, soft, still warm, the crust golden and cracked. You've been eating nothing but watery broth and grit for 3 days, and the smell alone makes your head spin. Marcus sets it down in front of you, crouches low, smiles like he's doing you a favor. "Just tell us about the pact," he says. "Just the beginning. Then you can eat." You stare at the bread. You feel it in your teeth already. Phantom crumbs crumbling across your tongue. But you don't move because you know what he's doing. The same way they use pain, now they're using mercy. It's all part of the same game. If they can't break you with fear, maybe they'll do it with kindness. You say nothing. He sighs and stands. "Pride," he mutters. "Always pride." Later, Elias comes. He never offers food, just words. "You're not the first," he says, pacing slowly in front of you. "Do you know how many have stood where you're sitting? Strong women, loud women, women with sharp eyes and sharper tongues. They all said what you're saying now. You don't look at him. They all broke," he says, voice soft. Eventually, he stops pacing, bends down. His breath smells like cloves and iron. "And when they broke, they wept," he says. "Do you know what they said? That it felt good to finally let it go. To speak the truth and be done with the weight. The weight. He doesn't know the half of it. You carry the weight of knowing your knowledge is seen as unnatural, that your care is seen as control, that your independence is mistaken for rebellion, that your memory of things, how to mix willow bark and valerian, how to bind a wound with comfrey and linen, is more dangerous to these men than fire or swords. You're tired. You're so tired. But you also remember. You remember old Margot from 3 villages over, who confessed after her son disappeared during a thunderstorm. They said he was taken by witches. She said she was one. She gave them a list of names. Her neighbors, her friends. Every name was burned. including hers. You remember the boy in the next town who was accused because he danced oddly at a festival. They said he was possessed. He confessed too, under pressure. Claimed he rode wolves by moonlight. They strangled him before the fire. Said it was mercy. And you remember the scholar? Yes, a man this time, who defended an accused woman by saying there was no evidence. The crowd turned on him, claimed only a witch would defend a witch. He vanished within the week. There is no winning. The room is cold, and you've learned to live with it. Your joints ache, and your back burns from the way you're forced to sleep, curled like a question mark. They leave the door open now, not out of trust, but confidence. Where would you run? And to whom? Everyone you know has already decided what you are. You hear them talking outside sometimes, the villagers. She never married, you know. I heard her mother was strange, too. She lived too close to the woods. My cousin swore she saw her walking with her eyes closed, like she was dreaming. Even silence, it seems, is evidence. You used to think the worst part would be the fire. Now you know better. It's the slow erasure, the way they strip you piece by piece from yourself until what's left is only what they've built in your place. The shell of you. A collection of strange glances and wilted herbs. A name whispered with fear. And yet somehow you still resist. You don't say the words they want, not because you think it'll save you. You know it won't. You resist because you still believe there's something worth holding on to. That somewhere beyond these walls, beyond the certain suspicion, there's still a piece of the world that knows you're not what they say. Then comes the night they bring in someone else. You hear her before you see her. A shuffle of tired feet, a sob caught in her throat. She's younger than you, barely more than a girl. Hair tangled, lips cracked from thirst. They push her into the cell next to yours, and you catch a glimpse of her face as she collapses against the wall. She looks like someone you used to know. Your cousin, maybe, or the girl who sold eggs in the next village. Her name is Lenny. She's accused of cursing a well after her brother drowned in it. The water turned bitter, they said. Sour, a sign. She doesn't last long. By the next morning, she's confessed. They say she met the devil in a dream, that he gave her a small knife with a serpent carved into the hilt, that she used it to slit open the earth and pull power from its roots, that she danced with goats and spoke in tongues and promised to bring ruin to her village. It's all fiction, of course, but now it's official fiction, written down, signed. And the worst part, she names you. You, the one she saw in the woods. You, the one who taught her how to grind time. You, the one who sang when you stirred the stew. None of it is true, but it doesn't matter. They read it to you aloud, and then they wait. Well, Elias asks, shall we begin again? You close your eyes. The air tastes of damp earth and burnt ash. You feel the bruises along your ribs like fingerprints from another life. You say nothing, but deep inside, something begins to fracture because you know what comes next. The trial, the crowd, the priest, the woodpile. They're done asking. Now they want to put on a show. They say you made a pact with the devil, that you signed your name in blood on a page that no one has seen, in a book that no one can produce, held by a creature no one can describe the same way twice. Some say he came to you in the form of a dog. Others, a tall man in a velvet coat with cloven hooves instead of feet. One witness swears you kissed his backside to seal the agreement. Another says you drank wine from a skull. None of them can agree on details, but they all say the same thing in the end. She gave herself to him willingly. It's absurd, of course. You don't even drink wine unless it's spiced and boiled. And the only animal you've kissed lately is Magda, who is far too judgmental to be mistaken for anything demonic. But that's not the point. Truth has long since left the building. Now, it's all about the story, and the story needs a pact. Without that, the rest doesn't stick. Without that, you're just a strange woman with herbs. Elias is relentless. He lays out a list of charges so long it curls off the table like a scroll. Maleficia, he calls them. Acts of spiritual and physical harm committed through sorcery. The list includes 3 dead cows, 5 miscarriages, 2 ruined harvests, a spoiled wine barrel, a case of hiccups that wouldn't stop for 6 days, and naturally, the weather. You have apparently made it rain too often, and also not enough. You're brought before the council for a final round of questioning, this time in public. The room is crowded, wooden benches packed with villagers, some of whom you once considered friends. You search their faces for anything: pity, anger, doubt. But most won't meet your gaze. Then comes the clincher, the proof of your pact, the devil's mark, that damn birthmark above your hip, the one that's been with you since the day you were born, a splash of red no bigger than a coin. To them, it's evidence, proof that the devil touched you, that you're branded like livestock. They even bring in the examiner to confirm. He pokes you with a needle again and declares that the mark felt no pain, which is a lie. You winced, but no one cares. The room reacts like he just pulled a smoking gun from your robes. Whispers break out. Someone crosses themselves. Another spits on the floor. You close your eyes and imagine what it might feel like to simply vanish. There's an odd, scholarly debate still simmering in modern circles about what the devil's mark actually referred to. Some say it was a misinterpretation of natural skin conditions: moles, warts, birthmarks, old scars. Others think it was entirely fabricated under duress. The mark only appeared when the interrogator wanted it to. A matter of forceful suggestion, wishful thinking, and a whole lot of bleeding nonsense. In that room, though, there is no debate, only conviction. They ask if you have anything to say for yourself, a final chance to repent. You know what they want to hear. The words line up in your mouth like frightened children. Yes, I did it. I met him. I danced. I cursed. But you don't say them. Instead, you take a breath and speak only this: I am not what you say I am. It isn't a defense. It's a eulogy. The sentence comes quickly. You're to be executed at dawn, burned at the stake for crimes against God and man. Your body to be reduced to ash so that your corruption may not spread. They don't even flinch when they say it. You're escorted back to your cell, this time with heavier chains. The guards don't speak. One of them won't even look at you. The other hums a hymn under his breath. Something about salvation and rivers of fire. You wonder if he'll be the one to light the pyre. In the corner of your cell, a single candle flickers. They left it there, maybe as a joke, maybe as a courtesy. You stare at the flame and try to remember every warm thing you've ever known. The way fresh bread smells in winter. The heat of the sun on your neck during harvest. Magda's feathers, soft and absurd, beneath your fingers. You won't see any of it again. They say the devil came to you, that you made a deal, but you know better. The only deal made here was between fear and power, and the cost was your life. There is a deep, dark irony in the fact that the methods of execution were often justified by the very nature of the crime they were punishing. Burning, the most theatrical and horrific of deaths, was reserved for heresy because fire was seen as a purifying agent. It didn't just kill the body, it supposedly cleansed the soul and erased the stain of the sin from the community. It was a spiritual act performed with physical brutality. For the onlookers, it was a terrifying spectacle meant to reinforce the power of the church and state, a warning that this fate awaited anyone who stepped outside the lines of acceptable belief and behavior. It was a public performance of control. They weren't just killing a person, they were killing an idea, or so they thought. The choice of death by fire was also practical in a morbid way. It left no body to be venerated as a martyr's relic, no grave to become a site of pilgrimage or descent. It was meant to be a final and total erasure, turning a person into nothing more than smoke and memory, a memory they intended to control. The public nature of these executions was crucial. This wasn't justice carried out in a hidden dungeon. It was a community ritual. The entire village was expected to attend, to witness the punishment, and to implicitly participate in the cleansing. It reinforced the social order by making everyone complicit in its violence. To not attend could be seen as a sign of sympathy for the condemned, which was a dangerous position to take. The ritual was designed to bind the community together in shared fear and righteousness, ensuring that the roots of dissent were not just cut, but burned away entirely. The meticulous preparation of the pyre, the public reading of the charges, the presence of clergy and officials, it was all designed to transform an act of murder into a solemn, legal, and holy necessity. It was a lie, but it was a lie the entire system was built upon. And as you sit in your cell, you understand this performance is not for you. It's for them. It's almost funny how much concern they show for your soul now that they've signed your death warrant. All at once, the priests appear softer, the guards more polite, as if execution is just a difficult parting and not the murder it is. You're given a crust of bread and a small cup of wine for comfort, they say. But you know what it really is? The ritual before the ritual, the easing of the conscience before the fire. They send in Father Olin before dawn. You knew him once. He taught you your first psalm. He let you eat sugared almonds from the offering plate when you were 7. He's thinner now, older, his hair gone silver at the temples, and today he's here to save your soul. He steps into the cell like a man walking through fog, expression unreadable. "My child," he begins, because of course he does. You say nothing. He kneels beside you as if to pray and takes your hand. His fingers are cold and dry. "The body is mortal," he says, "but the soul is eternal. If you confess, the Lord may forgive you even now." You look him in the eyes and you see something there. Not certainty, not hope, but doubt. The tiniest flicker of it, hiding beneath his robes like a mouse in a church. You wonder if he believes any of this anymore, or if he's just playing the part he's always played, too deep in the story to step out of it now. "I did not meet the devil," you whisper. "No pact, no spells, no marks, but those given by the world." He bows his head. "Is it shame or exhaustion?" "Then may God have mercy on you," he says. And just like that, he's gone. He leaves the wooden cross on the straw beside you. You don't pick it up. You have no more need for their symbols. Your own faith, if you can call it that, is quieter, older. It's in the turn of the season, in the memory of your grandmother's hands, in the stubborn persistence of the herbs that will keep growing in your garden long after your ashes are cold. You think about all the women before you, the ones whose names are lost, whose stories were burned with their bodies. You are one in a long, silent line, and in this moment, you feel a strange sense of connection to them, a grim sorority bound by fire and false witness. You are not dying alone. You are dying with all of them. The absurdity of it all strikes you. They fear you have power, that you can command storms and curdle milk. But in this cold cell, your only power is the refusal to give them the story they want, the power to own your final words. It's a small thing, a fragile thing, but it's yours. And as the first hint of gray light filters through the tiny window, you realize it's enough. They can take your life, but they cannot take the truth of who you were. They can burn your body, but your story will find other ways to be told. In whispers, in warnings, in the quiet acts of defiance, by the women who will come after you. They think this is an ending, but you know it's just the beginning of a different kind of life, a life lived in memory, in legend, in the unquiet heart of the village that condemned you. They don't let you walk alone. You're flanked by guards, wrists bound, feet dragging. You don't bother pretending to be brave. What would be the point? This is not a moment for dignity. This is a stage. And you, unfortunately, are the entertainment. The square is already crowded. People packed together like firewood, shivering with excitement or fear. It's hard to tell the difference. Children perch on shoulders. Elders lean on sticks. There's a man selling roasted chestnuts because apparently executions pair well with snacks. In the center stands the pyre, built high, stacked neat. Someone took their time with it. The wood is dry, and beneath it, packed straw. You're walked up to the platform, your feet barely lifting from the ground. The rope around your wrists is cut. Another is tied around your waist, securing you to the post. No one looks you in the face except one girl. She can't be more than 12. Her dress is too big, her hands stuffed into her sleeves. She watches you, eyes wide, unblinking. You wonder if she's the next you or the next Lenny, or if by some miracle she'll grow up in a world that no longer burns its women alive. Elias steps forward and reads the charges again, as if the crowd needs a reminder. He talks of sin, of Satan's lies, of the corruption that threatened their village. People nod. Someone says, "Amen." You feel the breeze shift against your face, the smell of wood and ash. They ask if you have final words. You nod, and then you say, "You're not safer without me, just emptier." No one claps, but someone somewhere gasps. They step back. The torch comes forward. Marcus is the one to hold it. You close your eyes, but the fire doesn't come right away. They wait. A priest begins to chant something in Latin. A woman begins to cry. Then at last, you hear it. The sound of straw catching. A hiss. A crackle. The slow birth of flame. It starts low, licking at the base of the pyre. You feel it before you see it, the heat creeping toward your feet like a cruel sunrise. Smoke curls upward, stinging your eyes, slipping down your throat. You cough, you gag, and the crowd holds its breath. But here's the strange thing. You don't scream. Not yet. And it shakes them. Some turn away. Others stare harder as if willing you to break. But you don't. Not because it doesn't hurt. Oh, it does. But because you refuse to give them that sound, that one last bit of power. Instead, you focus on the scent of burning time. Someone in the crowd must be holding a bundle. Or maybe it's your imagination. Maybe you've conjured it to carry you home. You think of Magda. You think of the forest. You think of the girl who watched you and wonder what stories will be told about you now. Will they say you floated above the flames? That you turned into a bird? That you cursed the town with your final breath? Or will they forget you entirely? The flames rise. Your world narrows to smoke and light and heat. Your vision blurs. And for one breathless moment, you see the outline of something in the sky. Not a demon, not a savior, just the shape of a bird wheeling overhead. Maybe it's a raven. Maybe it's Magda. Or maybe it's just your story finally breaking free. There is no grave, no marker, no cross. When the fire finishes its work, there's little left to bury. Some blackened bone, maybe, or a half-melted buckle from your shoe. The ashes are swept up by men with stiff faces and stiffer brooms, shoveled into a pit at the edge of the woods, the same woods they feared you walked into freely. The wind does the rest. By dusk, it's as if you were never there at all. But the trial doesn't end with your death. No, the real theater carries on like an encore no one asked for. People gather in the chapel, the tavern, even in their kitchens, swapping versions of the story like worn playing cards. Some say you floated above the fire and vanished in a column of smoke. Others insist the flames turned blue, a sure sign of sorcery. One man claims he heard a voice whisper in his ear as the smoke rose, "I will return." None of that happened, but it doesn't matter. In the 1600s, Europe, trials are as much about myth-making as they are about law. The accused becomes a parable, and the facts get fiddled for dramatic effect. Testimonies are written down, embellished, repeated, translated, and eventually bound into legal records or church scrolls. And once your name is inked on one of those pages, you become a symbol, a warning, a cautionary tale to keep young women quiet and old women afraid. The actual court records are thin, just enough to justify the pyre. A few lines about maleficium, unnatural knowledge, demonic influence. Lenny's name is written next to yours, her confession folded into your file like an afterthought. Her own case continues next week. Now that she's given them what they wanted from you, they no longer need her alive. And then, of course, there's the matter of your possessions. Your home is considered tainted now, but that doesn't stop them from going through it. The magistrate sends men to collect anything that might be useful or incriminating. Your herb bundles are pulled from the rafters and burned. Your books are confiscated. The one you kept hidden beneath the floorboard is found and mistaken for a grimoire. It was mostly soup recipes and notes on wound care, but they say it had symbols. That's all it takes. Magda somehow survives. A girl finds her hiding in the garden. For a while, they say she won't let anyone near her, puffing up and screeching if someone gets close. Eventually, she disappears into the woods. They'll say it was an omen. They'll say she turned back into her true form. A demon in disguise returned to the shadows. Or maybe she just found peace. The trial, meanwhile, becomes part of village memory. You become a ghost story, a fireside warning. Don't go into the woods or she'll find you. If you speak to birds, she'll steal your voice. Say her name 3 times and she'll whisper secrets through the window at night. These things are told with smiles and shivers, mostly by people who watched you walk to your death and said nothing. Still, some remember you differently. The blacksmith's daughter still keeps a little sachet of herbs you once gave her to ward off nightmares. She hides it under her pillow. Her mother doesn't know. The old man, who used to trade you onions, leaves a coin near your garden gate once a year, on the night the fire took you. He says it's just a superstition, and every so often, someone falls ill and no one can help. And someone else says, if she were still here, she'd know what to do. Not out loud, of course, only in whispers, only behind closed doors. Because even in death, you're dangerous. The strangest part about your death is that it doesn't stop you from being seen. Not really. In fact, if anything, you become more visible than ever. Now that you've been burned, people start seeing you everywhere. And not just your face, not the quiet woman who sold balm and mended wounds. Number. They see a shadow that moves behind the trees. They see a woman walking barefoot in the frost, hair down, eyes like cinders. They see you in dreams, in smoke, in puddles. You're everywhere they don't want to look. They call it spectral evidence, and it's a dangerous thing. It starts in nearby towns. A girl in Mergentheim says she woke in the night and saw you standing at the foot of her bed whispering numbers. When her father demands to know what the numbers mean, she says she doesn't know. But the next day, 3 chickens are found dead. Naturally, it's your doing. Another woman claims you sat on her chest in the night, heavy as a stone, and stole her breath. A man in Miltenberg says he saw your spirit in the flames of his hearth, grinning. He dumps holy water on the fire and starts sleeping with a knife under his pillow. You're dead. But now you're also haunting. Spectral evidence is the ultimate weapon in the witch hunter's arsenal. You don't need proof. You just need a dream, a nightmare, a feeling. The mere idea of a person appearing to you in spirit is enough to damn them or damn their memory. Courts begin accepting these visions as legitimate testimony. I saw her in the night. She touched me, though she was not there. Her spirit clawed at my window, and just like that, the dead can testify against the living. Across Europe, the stories begin to echo. In England, a woman named Elizabeth Clark was said to have sent her spectre to scratch at people's eyes while they slept. In Scotland, accused witches were said to appear in dreams and mutter curses that later came true. In the American colonies, yes, even across the sea, the echo stretched that far. Spectral evidence would eventually lead to the deaths of 20 people in Salem. Dreams hold more weight than reality. Visions are facts, and you, poor ghost, are the perfect candidate. Because you were already feared, because your name had already been twisted into a curse, and because you didn't scream. That unsettled them more than anything. Lenny swears she sees you every night now, that you hover over her bed, your face blackened by flame, your voice distant and cold. She begins to speak in riddles, says things like, "She's not finished," and "She walks when the wind blows west." They remove her from her cell and place her in isolation, not for safety, but because now she is beginning to look dangerous again. It doesn't help that people believe your soul can't rest. You weren't buried in consecrated ground. Your ashes were dumped. There was no priest at the fire's edge, no prayers for peace, just smoke and the stench of burnt linen. According to every superstition they hold, Your spirit is now unmoored, trapped, vengeful. They think you're angry, and maybe you are. You're not alone. That's the part the stories forget to mention. The truth that gets lost under the piles of ash and the fear-soaked sermons. Because for every woman who stands at the stake, there are others behind her, and in front of her, and beside her. Not all of them die, but many do. Some are burned, others hanged, others drowned in rivers that were supposed to cleanse them of sin, and some just vanish into woods, into caves, into whatever cracks the world has left for women who are too stubborn, too skilled, or too loud. Your story is not an isolated tragedy. It's a thread in a much larger weave, a dark, twisted tapestry of bodies and names, many of which are already forgotten. Across Europe, the numbers are staggering. Germany alone accounts for tens of thousands of accusations and executions. Switzerland, Poland, Scotland, France. Every region, every village, every faith finds its own rhythm for the ritual. Some are methodical with court records and stamped confessions. Others are messier, angrier, fueled by mobs and torches. But the outcome is the same. Flame, rope, water, silence. You're part of a grim sorority now, one you never asked to join. Walpurga Hausmannen, a midwife from Dillingen, burned in 1587 after confessing to murdering infants with demon powder. Anna Goldie, the last official witch executed in Switzerland in 1782, accused of bewitching a child by hiding needles in her food. Or the unnamed woman in Scotland whose only crime was being the midwife present when a noble woman miscarried. She was drowned. The noble woman remarried within the year. And it's not just women either. Men are accused too. Children, the elderly. In Bamberg, a 13-year-old boy named Hans is burned because he admits, after torture, to flying through the night on a stick given to him by a neighbor. In Trier, entire families are wiped out, house by house. At the height of the panic, no one is safe. You'd think something so widespread would spark resistance, but fear is a powerful silencer. A village that loses a dozen people to fire will still show up for the next execution, clutching their rosaries, convinced that this one will finally end the curse. Some officials even get addicted to the power. In Würzburg, Prince Bishop Philipp Adolf von Ehrenberg oversees hundreds of executions. He considers it righteous, cleansing, holy work. And when the crowd roars as another pyre is lit, it's not grief you hear, it's relief. Thank God it wasn't me. But there are cracks in the system, small ones at first. A judge here, a scholar there beginning to question the methods. In Amsterdam, a physician examines a so-called witch's mark and declares it a natural cyst. In France, a legal scholar dares to write that torture should not be admissible in witch trials. Their voices are drowned out by the sound of flames, but they exist. You'd like to think that maybe your death helped tip the scale, that someone saw your face, remembered your hands, the way they moved over wounds and bruises, and thought, that can't be evil. Maybe the girl who watched you on the day of your execution tells a different version of your story to her younger sister. Maybe she says you were wise, not wicked, that you were punished for knowing too much, not for cursing too many. But what they don't talk about are the ones who got away. Because not every accused witch ends up on the stake. Some vanish before the trial, slip away in the night with only the clothes on their back and the name they were born with buried deep under another. Not all of them survive, of course. The road is cruel. The woods are colder than people think, but some make it. Some live. You would have liked them. Women who wore knowledge like armor. Men who knew when to be silent and when to speak. Children taught to keep secrets. Taught that sometimes running is the only kind of magic that works. They disappear into forests and mountain passes, into crumbling stone ruins and caves wrapped in moss. No one knows their names. Not anymore. But the legends? Oh, those live on. There's the story of the red-haired woman who escaped a Scottish fishing village by hiding in a cart of seaweed. They say she settled near the cliffs and lived with gulls for company. People would leave her food in exchange for herbal cures and whispered fortunes. She never spoke again, they say. Not once, but when a storm was coming, she'd stand at the edge of the cliffs with her arms raised. And somehow, the boats always came home safe. Or the German twins, accused of cursing the town baker after his loaves began rising in the shape of horns. One of them was caught and confessed under torture, but only after insisting her sister was dead. She wasn't. She was hiding in a burned-out mill deep in the hills, carving charms into stone and watching smoke trails from afar. It's said she lived 20 more years, haunting the village with curses that sounded suspiciously like wind through the trees. These escapes become their own kind of folklore, less terrifying than the witches who died, more romantic somehow. Survivors with dirt under their nails and fire in their lungs. They walk among the townspeople under new names, quietly, carefully watching the wind for signs of the next purge. And while no one says it aloud, there's always someone helping them. Because even in the darkest villages, there's always at least one person who knows the truth, who saw what happened to their sister, their mother, their friend, who regrets not speaking, who hides fugitives in root cellars and offers scraps of bread with shaking hands. These helpers don't wear heroes' cloaks. Most are just tired of the lies, tired of the screaming, tired of the fire, and they too carry a burden. Because helping a witch, even an accused one, is enough to get you burned yourself. So, they walk carefully, speak gently, and keep their secrets tucked beneath their floorboards like dried herbs no one can name. Historians still argue about how many witches escaped. Some say the number is small, barely a footnote. Others suggest that for every woman burned, 2 more vanished. The records are incomplete, sometimes purposefully so. Whole trials erased, families relocated, names scrubbed clean by sympathetic scribes. Some believe that these survivors are the roots of other movements, the women's herbal networks, the underground midwifery circles, the mysterious wise women who seem to appear just when someone was dying and leave just before they healed. Running, though, is no guarantee of peace. Living under false names, in borrowed clothes, with no fire and no friends, it takes a toll. Some escapees vanish into drink, others into madness. A few live long enough to see the witch hunt slow, but they never feel safe again. The flames follow them, always just behind their eyes. You never called it magic. It wasn't magic. It was just what people did before they forgot how to listen to the world. You learned from your grandmother, who learned from hers, how to read the bend in a stalk, the weight of a root, the color of a bruise, when to pick chamomile, and when to leave it alone, how to steep fever-few for migraines, and how to bind nettles in cloth so you didn't blister your fingers. None of it was mystical, just memory, habit, earth knowledge. But to the people who feared you, that was magic. What they didn't understand, they feared. And what they feared, they burned. The truth is, folk magic, real, practical, everyday magic, was everywhere in the 1600s Europe. In every house, in every garden, behind every closed shutter, where someone whispered an old rhyme over their newborn's crib, or tied a string of rowan berries above the door, just in case. People weren't modern in their thinking yet. They still believed the world had rules you couldn't always see. So they hedged their bets, crossed themselves, and then spit over their shoulders, prayed to saints, and then tucked garlic in their pockets. You knew how to use herbs, but so did every grandmother. You made charms. So did the women in the next village. The difference between a healer and a witch wasn't in what you did. It was in how people felt about you while you did it. There was a woman once, 3 valleys away, who was known to talk the fire out of burns. She'd whisper over the wound and blow gently, and the pain would ease. They said it was a gift until a local lord's son died of fever while she treated him. Then it became a curse. She was dead within the week. It's always like that. Your gift is only safe as long as the results are good. One mistake, one rumor, one wrong look, and suddenly you've got a devil's pact you didn't sign. Even the church couldn't make up its mind about folk magic. In some regions, priests used blessings that sounded suspiciously like charms. Holy water mixed with rose water. Psalms read backward for protection. There's documented evidence of priests in France giving people small relics wrapped in paper, saying they'd keep witches away while simultaneously preaching against the use of superstition. What's divine in Latin becomes heresy in a woman's voice. There were many kinds of magic back then. Low magic, high magic, ceremonial, practical. High magic was for noblemen with libraries who spent long nights scribbling alchemical symbols and summoning planetary forces in Latin. That kind of magic was protected, even admired. Low magic, the kind women used to make babies sleep, keep milk from souring, help the dying pass peacefully, was what got you hanged. But here's what they didn't know. Sometimes the magic was real, not in the way they imagined. You didn't fly or summon fire from your hands, but there were nights when your prayers, your rhymes, your grandmother's chants worked a little too well. When someone on the edge of death came back blinking, as if pulled from the edge. When the herbs you picked felt warmer than the sun that grew them. When your hands tingled after touching a tree, struck by lightning. You never told anyone, because you didn't have a name for it. You just knew that sometimes the world spoke to you in patterns, in stillness, in a dream that felt like memory. And what were you supposed to do with that? Cities feel safer at first. That's the lie they wrap in stone and sell with brick and soot. There's anonymity in crowds, after all. More people, more places to disappear. No one cares if your shawl is a little ragged or if you carry odd-smelling jars in your satchel. In a city, you can walk past a dozen people who will never know your name. You think that means freedom, but it doesn't. It just means no one will remember you when things go wrong. Urban witch trials are different from the ones in rural villages. In the countryside, they burn you because their cow died, and you looked at it wrong. In cities, it's more political, more performative, less about cows, more about power. The rules are the same. Don't stand out. Don't speak too sharply. Don't let anyone see you gather herbs after dark. But the stakes are dressed in velvet and pronounced by men in powdered wigs. Take Cologne, for instance, or Augsburg, Strasbourg, cities with universities and money and parliaments, places where the accusation of witchcraft might be dressed up with Latin and stamped with seals, but underneath, it's the same old story. Someone got scared, someone else got angry, and now you're on trial. In cities, they don't always burn you. Sometimes they drown you in paperwork first. There's a woman in Vienna, Maria. You wouldn't know her, but her story would ring familiar. She's a laundress with a sharp tongue and a bad habit of making herbal teas that work too well. One day, the wife of a city official accuses her of bewitching her baby after the child won't sleep for 3 nights in a row. Maria is arrested, questioned, and examined. They find no devil's mark, no familiar, no evidence at all. But the official's wife refuses to drop it. And so, the trial begins. It lasts 7 weeks. No one can remember what started it by the time it ends. She's found guilty. She's hanged in the market square. Cities like to pretend they're more rational, more civilized, but their fear just wears fancier shoes. In some trials, the charge isn't just witchcraft. It's disrupting the order of society, being a threat to structure, to obedience. In the city, being accused isn't just about herbs or hexes. It's about stepping out of line. Still, some find sanctuary in cities. For every trial, there are women who slip between the cracks, who become invisible in plain sight. Healers who sell their knowledge in whispers and coin. Midwives who keep their books locked in cabinets. Apothecaries with back rooms filled with things the law says shouldn't exist. No one calls them witches, not to their faces, but they all know. And most of the time, they're left alone because cities need them. The mayor's wife wants a potion for sleep. The brewer's daughter wants to stop coughing. The guardsman wants something to keep his hands from shaking after battle. In a place where bodies are always crowding together, where disease spreads like gossip and poverty makes people mean, someone who knows how to heal without ceremony is valuable. But useful doesn't mean safe. Because when things turn, they turn fast. A fire breaks out in a bakery and destroys 3 city blocks. People look for someone to blame. The baker says his wife was acting strange, humming while kneading dough. The neighbors say she was talking to cats. She's arrested, and when questioned, she says nothing. They say her silence is unnatural. The city burns her. Later, they find out the fire started because the chimney was blocked. Too late. You always knew the church would be watching. It watches everything with eyes sharper than any inquisitor's blade and ears pressed to every confession booth from here to Rome. And in the 1600s Europe, the church isn't just a Sunday obligation or a place to marry off your cousin. It's the backbone of life, law, morality, even breath. To step out of line with the church isn't just rebellion, it's treason against the soul. And witches, they say, are the worst traitors of all. To them, you didn't just sin, you sided with the enemy. It wasn't always this hostile. In the early centuries, before the printing press spread panic like wildfire, many local priests tolerated or even participated in folk practices. A sprinkle of holy water here, a whispered charm there. The village healer was often their ally, not their adversary. After all, what was a good outcome? Healed child, safe mother, if not evidence of God's favor. But the tide turned. The Protestant Reformation kicked a hole in the wall of religious certainty, and both Catholics and Protestants scrambled to plug it with rules, fear, and fire. Anything that smelled of the old ways was suspect. The Church rebranded superstition as satanic, and suddenly, all those helpful herbs and cozy rituals became evidence of a pact with the devil. The real irony: the Church believed witches had power, that they really could fly, control weather, make men impotent, summon demons in the shape of hares. They didn't think you were delusional. They thought you were dangerous. And that belief, ironclad, dogmatic, unshakable, meant they weren't interested in hearing your side. You could tell them, until your tongue dried out, that your salves were for coughs, not curses, but they'd still tie you to a post with the confidence of men who knew they were doing God's work. It wasn't just the Church that hunted, of course. In many places, secular courts took the lead, but the lines blurred fast. Bishops sat in judgment. Priests gathered evidence. Monks recorded confessions that smelled suspiciously like fiction. And when the trials came, it was always the Church that offered the final stamp of moral legitimacy. This wasn't murder. This was salvation, for everyone else anyway. There was no salvation for you. Theologically, the Church insisted witches couldn't go to heaven, not unless they confessed. And even then, only if they were truly repentant. And even then, the fire still burned. You might save your soul, but your body, ashes and smoke. They wrapped it in mercy, claimed they were doing you a favor. Better to burn for a minute than for eternity. But here's where things get strange. Because for all the Church's wrath and rigidity, Christianity was never one thing. Not in practice. Beneath the official liturgies and proclamations, the people still held on to 1,000 tiny rituals. Holy water, mixed with salt and rosemary. Candles burned on specific saints' days for protection. Coins placed under a baby's crib to keep away the evil eye. The very same practices the Church condemned from the pulpit, it often tolerated in the pews. In Spain and Italy, where the Inquisition had a tighter grip, you might think the fire burned hotter. But that wasn't always the case. Ironically, in some regions, the Inquisition was less likely to execute accused witches. It was more centralized, more bureaucratic, and sometimes more skeptical of peasant accusations. Superstition? Yes. Satanic conspiracy? Less so. Meanwhile, in Protestant territories like Scotland, Germany, and parts of France, local judges had terrifying autonomy. Trials ballooned into frenzies. The Church didn't invent the fear, but it legitimized it, sanctified it, made it sacred. And no one questions a sacred fire. They called you a fiend, a harlot of Satan, a corrupter of children, of men, of the very fabric of the community. But you know better. You know what you were, what most of you were. Not devils, not demons in disguise, just women with knowledge, women with questions, women who didn't shrink when told to. And that made you dangerous. There's a word that modern voices use when they look back at you. Feminist. A word that didn't exist in your lifetime, but fits around your memory like an old, warm cloak. You didn't know what patriarchy was, but you knew what it meant to be told to sit down when you had something to say, to be watched too closely, too constantly, to be asked for your help and then punished for giving it, to know that your thoughts were not your own. Not really. Not once the wrong man decided to twist them into curses. The more you look at it, the more it seems like what they feared was not witchcraft at all. It was power. your power, the power to heal without a license, to know things without being taught by a man, to refuse a husband and still feed yourself, to speak when you weren't spoken to age without apology, to bleed without hiding, to walk alone. A woman alone is a threat. A woman who doesn't need is suspect. A woman who knows too much is an accusation waiting to happen. So they called you witches, because calling you wise would have been too dangerous. And they didn't just punish you for what you were. They punished you for what you might become, what you might teach, what you might inspire. You were not just an individual, you were an example, a warning to others who thought they might step outside the narrow corridors built for them. Do you want to know how many of the accused were women? 80%, maybe more, depending on the region. And what about the women who turned you in? Because yes, there were many. It was neighbors, friends, mothers, daughters. They accused because they were scared, because they thought they were next, because a confession under torture begged for more names, and yours was the one they remembered best. Were they your enemies? Maybe. But maybe they were just trapped like you, caught in a world where being a woman meant always being a little bit guilty, where survival meant betrayal, where there were no good options, just slow deaths or fast ones. Still, you understand why people look back now and see resistance in your bones. Modern feminists write about witch trials as acts of gendered violence, mass executions aimed at keeping women docile. And they're not wrong. The witch craze flattened powerful women, midwives, matriarchs, widows with property, unmarried women with too much independence. It was a systematic pruning of the female vine. Cut back anything that grows too wide, and if you dare to grow tall, you burned. It wasn't just about fear of the devil. It was about controlling the female body, her voice, her mind. If you bled too much, you were cursed. If you bled too little, barren. If you birthed too easily, suspicious. If you miscarried, you must have killed the child with magic. Your womb was everyone's concern, but yours. Your choices were never truly yours. And yet, there's strength in being called dangerous, because somewhere along the way, witch stopped meaning evil. It started meaning powerful. Your death was meant to silence. Instead, it became an origin story, a mythology that women have taken back piece by piece. They say time smooths things out, that it wears down the jagged parts of history, files off the edges, until all that's left is a neat little story suitable for textbooks and tourist plaques. But your story, the one buried in ash and herbs and silence, time hasn't softened it. If anything, it's made it louder, because now, centuries later, they've started digging, literally. In towns across Europe, archaeologists are uncovering bones with strange markings, holes drilled into skulls, burns on femurs, knife cuts made post-mortem, mass graves, some of them too shallow, too hasty. Human remains found beneath old courthouses, beneath what used to be gallows, beneath fields where nothing has grown for years. And every time someone whispers the same word, witches, they dig up your past, brush off the dirt, photograph it under artificial light. They document every break and bruise, and tag your femur with a code number. Forensic evidence, they call it. But to you, it's just your body being handled again, centuries too late. They want to know who you were, what really happened. They study trial records, dusty Latin scribbles penned by men who barely knew you. They analyze spellbooks, Grimoires once banned by the church, now displayed in glass cases with climate control. They scan old court transcripts for names, dates, descriptions of your crimes. They try to map the panic, the logic, the terror. They try to make sense of the fire. And some of them, to their credit, really do try to tell the truth. They say things like, "She was most likely a healer," or "These accusations often followed land disputes," or "Torture led to false confessions." They acknowledge the mass psychosis, the patriarchy, the church's grip. They know now that most of the accused were innocent, but the story still tastes bitter in their mouths. They can't undo what happened, so they memorialize it instead. Across Europe, small plaques have begun to appear on old stone walls, on rusted iron gates, on crumbling town squares. Some read, "Here stood a woman accused of witchcraft. Her name is unknown." Others offer an apology from the modern town council, centuries too late. A handful of countries, Norway, Switzerland, Scotland, have issued formal pardons to those killed in the witch trials. Empty gestures maybe, but gestures all the same. In one German town, there's a statue of a woman with her hands tied, eyes closed, face tilted upward. It's not labeled, no plaque, just there, quiet, waiting. Children climb on it in the summer. Locals place wildflowers at its feet in winter. In another, there's a memorial garden. Lavender, rosemary, rue. Herbs once feared, now planted with care. And people still come. Not many, but enough. Women mostly, some with their daughters. They touch the stones. They whisper names. Some cry. Some light candles. Some just stand, hands in pockets, as if waiting for someone to appear from the shadows and say, "I remember you." You're in the museums now too. The witchcraft wing of a medieval exhibit, complete with wax figures, replica torture instruments, and interpretive panels written in cautious academic language. You've become history, an attraction, something to learn from, but not too closely. No one wants to admit how recent it all still feels, how little it would take to do it again. Because let's be honest, the witch trials never really ended. Not completely. They just changed costumes. The field where they burned you is quiet now. You wouldn't recognize it. The stake is gone, the ashes scattered, the crowd long dispersed. There's no smell of smoke, no blackened ground, no ropes, no screams, just grass, wind, and silence. A thin path cuts through the field, well-trodden, but unremarkable. Children chase each other across it in summer. In the winter, the snow blankets it so perfectly that no one remembers what's buried beneath. But some do, not by name, not even by story, just by sense. They walk past that patch of earth a little quicker. They lower their voices. One child swears she sees shadows in the tall grass, something moving that isn't the wind. Her mother hushes her sharply. Don't say things like that. But later that night, the mother lights a candle and leaves it by the window. Just one, no explanation. That's how memory works. When it's not allowed to speak, it mutates, slips sideways, becomes folklore. You're not a woman anymore. You're a legend. The tale changes, grows legs of its own. In one version, you cursed the crops before they dragged you away. In another, you died with a smile on your lips and a raven perched nearby. Someone claims the apples never grew quite right again. Someone else says your ghost walks the woods. And every now and then, someone returns. Not from the dead, not quite, but from the long echo of history. A stranger with dark hair and a woven shawl appears at the edge of the market, offering remedies for coughs and charms for love. She knows things she shouldn't. She walks too confidently. Her eyes flick toward that quiet field, and when someone asks where she's from, she smiles and says, "Far enough." People talk, and then she's gone. You might think all this would end in forgetting, that eventually the fire would consume not just your body, but your story. But stories like yours don't die easily. They adapt. They survive the way you would have, given the chance. They duck their heads, change their names, hide in lullabies and recipes until it's safe to breathe again. A modern girl finds an old book in a second-hand shop, leather-bound, handwritten, no title, just a collection of charms, herbal cures, strange symbols. She flips through the pages with growing curiosity. She starts trying the things inside: a tea for sleep, a bath for anxiety, a ritual with a white candle and rosemary for protection. They work, not in cinematic ways, but subtly. Her house feels calmer, her dreams less jumbled, her breath steadier. She starts writing notes in the margins. One day, in a quiet burst of certainty, she writes your name at the bottom of a page, just your name, and something shifts. In another place, a woman walks barefoot through her garden, speaking to the soil. She doesn't know why. Her grandmother did it. Her mother did it. She does it. She plants sage near the threshold, rue at the corners, rosemary by the back fence. She says it's for flavor, but the placement is too precise. A man passes her house and says, half joking, "She's got a witch's garden." She doesn't correct him. And somewhere else entirely, in a university classroom with fluorescent lights and bad coffee, a student gives a presentation on the European witch trials. She quotes statistics, names, places, but when she gets to the end, her voice changes. She puts down her notes and she says, "We talk about them like numbers, but they were people. My great-great-grandmother was one of them. I just want to say her name out loud where someone might hear." And she does, and you do. It always starts the same way. Something goes wrong. A child falls sick. A storm ruins the harvest. A husband strays and doesn't come home. The village searches for a reason. Because reason is comfort, randomness is too cruel, and in the absence of answers, they turn toward suspicion. They comb the town for anything that doesn't fit. And there you are, standing just a little too straight, speaking just a little too clearly, keeping herbs in jars that don't have labels. That's all it takes. That and someone with a grudge, a neighbor you embarrassed, a man you refused, a wife jealous of your ease with her child. They whisper your name to the wrong ear, and from that point on, it's only a matter of time. Your days become watched, your words dissected. That story you told about a dream, suddenly proof of devilish insight. The time you cured a fever with a tincture, a sign that you caused the illness in the first place. They twist kindness into harm, attention into malevolence. You've seen it happen before, but this time it's you. The worst part, most of them don't think they're doing anything wrong. They think they're protecting their town, their family, their souls. They're afraid. And fear doesn't care about truth. It cares about survival. So, they justify it. Tell themselves you asked for it somehow. That the signs were there. That no innocent woman would walk alone after sunset. That no godly woman would live without a man. That no simple healer would know so much about blood and pain and childbirth. But you're not simple, and they know it. That's why they're afraid. You have something they don't understand. Not just knowledge, though that's part of it, but confidence, presence, a way of existing that doesn't seek their permission. That's the true crime. You live as if the world is yours to interpret. You act like your life belongs to you. And in the 1600s Europe, that's enough to get you killed. But here's the twist. It's the same trait that ends up saving pieces of you. That quiet, rooted certainty that you're right to know what you know, that you're right to trust your gut, your hands. The wisdom passed from mother to daughter, like breath. That's what preserves you, even after the ropes tighten, because when they dragged you to the square, you didn't beg. When they accused, you didn't weep. When the fire took you, you looked them in the eyes. And that, more than anything, is what stays in their memory. They'll say you were mad or evil, or under Satan's sway. They'll rewrite the ending in their favor, but some of them, especially the ones with daughters, will remember how you stood there unbowed, and they'll wonder quietly whether they just killed someone they should have learned from. The witch trials were never about witches. They were about control, about drawing a line in the dirt and saying, "You may not cross this." And every time a woman did, they made an example of her. But they had to keep making examples, didn't they? Because women kept crossing. They still do. You never asked to be a symbol. You never wanted to be a martyr, a myth, a lesson in resistance. But now that you are, you're not alone. You never were. You had sisters across mountains, across borders, across time. Women who also stood too tall, who also burned, who also knew, and their fire joins yours. Together, you've become something they never expected. Unkillable. Your story is not just one of death. It's one of memory and courage and survival. Of how knowledge smolders in silence and springs to life the moment someone dares to speak it again. They thought they buried you, but all they did was plant a seed, and it's growing. You were never supposed to have a legacy. That's the part they never planned for. The courts, the clergy, the judges in velvet, and the men with torches. They weren't trying to create martyrs. They were trying to erase you. They wanted you forgotten, feared, flattened into nothing more than a moral warning. But memory doesn't work that way. Not when your story is woven into the blood of generations. Not when your voice gets caught in the lungs of every woman who learns to say no. And now, you're everywhere. You're on t-shirts and coffee mugs. We are the granddaughters of the witches you couldn't burn. It's a cute line, marketable, even. But behind it sits a history smothered in smoke and screams. Behind it is you, standing barefoot on damp earth with your hands tied and your life misunderstood. People conjure you now without even knowing it. They call it empowerment, intuition, divine feminine. They sage their apartments, pull tarot spreads under moonlight, chant affirmations into mirrors. They may never know your name or the town where your trial was held, but they know what it feels like to be told their voice is too sharp, their emotions too wild, their knowing too much. And every time they push back, that's you. Every time a girl refuses to be smaller, quieter, more palatable, more convenient, you're in that choice. You're stitched into the moment when someone trusts their gut, speaks up in a meeting, walks away from a table where they are no longer fed. You're the hush before the answer, the glare after the insult, the hand held out to another woman saying, "I see you. I know what they did to you. I'm still here." Your face is changing. You're no longer just a hunched old woman with wild eyes. You're no longer the cartoonish cackler over a cauldron. Now, you're young and old, fierce and gentle, black and brown and white and every hue in between. You're trans and queer and powerful in ways they never imagined witches could be. You're no longer a stereotype. You're a prism. You're intersectional now. You've been reclaimed by movements bigger than yourself. Feminism, yes, but also justice, resistance, autonomy. You're not just about herbs and hexes. You're about land rights, reproductive rights, identity. You're about standing at the edge of the world and daring to exist without apology. And now, the fire is out. The smoke has thinned. The shouting is long gone. All that remains is the hush, like the breath that comes after the storm has passed, when the world feels still, but not quite safe. You've walked through the terror, the trial, the flames. You've listened to the voices, the grief, the rage, and the strange beauty of survival. And maybe now, just maybe, you're ready to rest. Because this isn't just a bedtime story. It's a reckoning. The truth is, the witch was never just one woman. She was thousands. She is thousands. She is power feared and misunderstood. She is knowledge punished and hidden. She is pain folded into myth. And through all of it, she has become something more. Not forgotten, not erased, remembered. So, if your fingers ever brush a feather on the ground and you feel something quiet stir, or if the scent of rosemary makes you pause, or if the wind through the trees sounds just a little like a voice, don't be afraid. That's her. That's you. Coming back into the world, one whispered story at a time. Now, as you ease your head into the pillow, let go of the stake, the rope, the smoke. Let the weight slide off your shoulders. Breathe deep. You're not standing in the square anymore. You're not on trial. You're free. And tomorrow, you wake up stronger, louder, wiser. So sleep well, my lovely witch. You made it. They didn't burn all of you. Not even close.